Okay.
And
action. No, Mom, we're not voguing.
We're voguing. We're voguing. Okay, never mind. We're actioning.
Action.
Action. Welcome to today's Tuesday Talk with Red, episode 11, where I've titled this one, Fragile Strength and Infertility. So this episode is very near and dear to my heart. It is probably going to be one of a handful of just tender and sweet episodes that I'll do, but it is very integral to the layout of my whole story. I felt like this was the best time to insert this one in because a couple of episodes coming in the near future deal with my children in a lot more personal ways, and so I felt like the fact that they're here tells you I made it through my bout with infertility. And so I just felt like this was the right time. This is the right time to insert this one. So I'm just going to tell my story of this specific, very life-changing moments in my life. So if you remember when I was talking in my childhood trauma story and how because of my need to try and get men to love me, I spent a bulk of my teenage and young adulthood years being very promiscuous. So during that time, when I was 16 years old, I had gone to a gynecologist and was told that I couldn't have children. So as a 16-year-old, I don't think that really mattered much. As far as thinking about my future, I was thinking in the now, like, all teenagers do, because we have not developed our frontal lobe when we're teenagers. And so I thought that was my free pass to do whatever I wanted because I didn't have to worry about getting pregnant. Of course, there was a lot of other things that I should have been thinking about, but that's a different story. So imagine, came to a place where I was dating my now ex-husband. We were engaged. I had to have this kind of rough conversation of this is what you're buying into. Like, this is the future, is I cannot have children. Adoption is absolutely on the table. That's like, it's not like it wasn't, but I felt like he needed to know that before he stepped in, and he did. He leaned in with me, and this was just going to be our life. So we've been married just a little bit under 2 years when I had gone to just a regular checkup with a new doctor in a new city that we had just moved to. And I was explaining to him my history. And he said, do you mind if I run some tests? And I was like, sure, fine. I don't know what you mean by tests, but let's do it. I probably should have asked that first because they were very uncomfortable. But so he ran a plethora of tests on me. He went ahead and ran some tests on David just to, be sure so that we didn't hit, that wall as well. And he came in and he said, I don't want to say that it's impossible for you to have children. He said, but it is going to be very difficult for you to have children. So I had and have something called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome, which I know many of us have. I've seen a lot of my friends post and talk about that openly. There were some other issues that complicated that, which took us down the path of not impossible, but improbable. So we started to see if we could treat all of those various components individually and see if collectively it would make it where I could get pregnant. So spent many, I think I was 21, around about 21, spent many, no, I had to have been older than that. I'm not good with math. I think y'all figured this out already by the time you get to 11, but that's okay. So many treatments, many doctor's visits, and I'll never forget the day that I took my first pregnancy test and it was positive. I came running in to my bedroom. It was in the wee hours of the morning, and I came running into my bedroom and I started jumping up and down on the bed because I was so excited because I was pregnant. And I think we took off work that day because we were so just beside ourselves, you know, just the heartache of struggling through this. Made a doctor's appointment, went in to see the doctor, did an ultrasound, saw this little thing on a black screen that they said was a baby. I was so excited. No. First, we sat down, had, you know, his parents come up from where they live, my parents come in from where they live, and just it happened all the time. My parents and his parents are friends outside of just us, so it was really cool to have that dynamic. So they came in, and we came up with this little creative way, nothing like you guys do today. I mean, these we're having babies and gender reveals are like off the charts now. Like, we didn't do stuff like that, but and did a cute little, you know, you're going to be a grandparents thing, and it was wonderful and it was beautiful. And I went in for another checkup because of everything that had been happening to try and get me to where I could have a baby. Went in for another checkup, and I will never forget laying in that room and looking at a big screen on the wall and knowing what I was seeing, but the tech couldn't say anything. She said, okay, she's like, let me go get the doctor. And I knew. My doctor was not in the office that day. And so the on-call doctor actually came in and, you know, looked at it and told me what I knew, and that it was that we were miscarrying. So I made the decision to miscarry on my own, which there's a lot of pros and cons to that. I understand. I've had friends that have had major complications out of trying to navigate those waters on their own. So, you know, I'm not a proponent for either way at this point, but that was difficult. It was very difficult to do that on my own at home. But it was my ex-husband and I. We were alone when it happened. We know exactly when it happened. And we named that baby. That baby's name was Taylor. We grieved tremendously. I don't think people talk enough about the grief that comes with miscarriage. I mean, I think if you haven't ever struggled with it, if you've never been really close to people who have struggled with it, you sometimes have a tendency to think, you know, if you're not having to deliver a stillborn, that it's not as traumatic. And I'm here to say it's traumatic. It's traumatic. Which I'll talk to that here in just a second. But so we waited the right amount of time, went back to the doctor, got everything reset for what we needed to do, and came up pregnant again. This time, I didn't want to tell anybody. I wanted this just to be ours. I was petrified. I was petrified that if something were to happen, I was going to have to admit a failure again. And so we didn't tell anybody. The sad part about that was when we went back in for the second doctor's visit, they said, you know, your numbers aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, and you will probably lose this one as well. I held out hope that that was not true, but eventually it did happen. And so I was glad we didn't tell anybody, but then I was devastated that we didn't tell anybody because we didn't have anybody in our corner to support through this. So when it happened a third time and that test was positive, I told everybody to be able to have the support, have the prayer, have the checking in on us, all of those things. But I think in the back of my mind, I thought, because if this miscarriage happens again, I need there to be somebody there. And it happened again. So that was 3 miscarriages in the time span of about a year and a half. And I didn't know what to do but sit in shame. I just sat in shame. I hid from people. I felt like it was my fault. It's my body that is not doing what it should be doing. And I just sat in shame about it. I didn't know how to grieve it right. I was angry. I was angry at God. I was angry at friends. I was angry at, you know, I had a friend that came up pregnant who didn't even like children at all and made it very clear and talked about getting an abortion. And that's not on her, it's on me, because I'm sitting in my shame. I'm watching teenage girls come up pregnant and walk around and have healthy babies. Here I am just wanting a child, and I can't have one. So the doctor that came in with that very first baby became my full-time OBGYN. And in the clinic that I was in, Cornerstone Clinic for Women, one of the doctors there, his daughter had illustrated a book. And so they gave it to me after my second miscarriage. And I couldn't read it the first time. But after that third one, I read it. And I have shared this book with many, many people that have walked the road of miscarriage or loss of a child in general. And it's called Mommy, Please Don't Cry. And it's the most precious book to me. It was like salve to a soul. You'll see written in here that I have all of my miscarriages, when they happened, and when my 2 children were born in between. But it talks about, or it speaks to mothers, to grieving mothers, from the perspective of the baby that they lost. And when you open the first page and it says, "Mommy, please don't cry. A beautiful angel carried me here." It opened the floodgates of tears that I didn't even know had been sitting there this long, right? And the second page, "I met Jesus today, Mommy. He cradled me in his big, strong arms, and he made me feel so happy inside." And it ends, it talks all the way through the things that this baby's doing. But it goes all the way through until the baby says, "Mommy, please don't cry. I'll wait right here for you." And so for a believer, I knew that I was going to see my babies one day. But it didn't make the hurt go away. So we had just started going to a new church. And we were meeting in homes still on a Wednesday night. We'd gone to the pastor's home. There was the whole group that had been coming together were at the pastor's home. And nobody knew this road that I had been walking. No one knew it. But when it came time for prayer at the end of the night, went around the room and does anybody have prayer requests? And we always would have prayer requests, and someone would write them all down, and then we would pray over this list of prayer requests. And I just raised my hand and asked for physical healing. That's all I said. Nobody, not a soul in that room knew what it was for. But we got to the end, and my pastor said, I know normally we go through all these. He's like, but I just feel like we need to scripturally anoint Billy and pray over her. And they did just that. That was in December of 2001. It was at the end of December. And in January, I was pregnant again. Now, the hardest part about that is I had gone back for my second doctor's visits. The numbers weren't doubling like they were supposed to. And my doctor, with tears in her eyes, came in and said, the numbers aren't looking good again. And I just want to prepare you for that, but we'll have you come back in 2 days. So I went home, and I almost just settled into it. I almost just was like, you know what? Okay, here we go again. Like I know the routine. My dog knew the routine. Like she was there with me. We just knew what was coming. But I just prayed for me to navigate through this a different way. And I went back into the doctor 2 days later, and my numbers had skyrocketed. And we did an ultrasound, and I saw Isabella for the first time. And she's sitting right there, and she's crying. I saw her for the first time, and I knew something was different. I had a perfect pregnancy. I had a great-ish delivery. My epidural wore off, so she came out a la natural. That was great. And like, to look at this baby and see what God had redeemed for no doing of my own, all for him. I knew there was something in store. There was something big in store for her, for us as a family. And I wouldn't trade it. I hate the journey, but I love the journey because it made me so much more grateful for this baby I was walking around with in my belly. It made me grateful for this baby I was now carrying in a carrier. I couldn't complain. I didn't have any right to complain about anything. She still annoyed me. She still annoyed the mess out of me because she's colicky and cried all the time and didn't want to sleep and had a cold for the first 3 months of her life, but whatever. She was precious. So, sitting in the hospital, my husband said, well, we ready to have another one? Girl, I gave him this same face right here. But almost 3 years later, or 2 years later, I found myself unexpectedly pregnant. And I was like, where did this come from? Surely this means this one will be fine because we didn't do anything to get this way. Like, and they say that, a lot of times after your body gets in the groove of it, it's a lot, it finally learns what it's supposed to be doing. And so it picks up and, we have us another baby. I lost that baby. I don't know if I was more devastated about that than losing Taylor or any of the other two. Because now I'm pissed. I'm like, body, you got it right finally. Why are we going down this path again? So we started trying to do all the right things and, get all the numbers or whatever. And I had gone into my doctor's visit because I have to get checked before we can let that try to be a month to get pregnant. Follow me. Follow the bouncing ball. And I walked in and she said, well, she's like, your numbers don't show that this is a month. You can get pregnant if you wanted to. So she blew it out the window. It's like, okay, fine, whatever. It came around time the next month for me to go get these tests run again. And I called to get my meds, go pick up my meds. And she said, well, the ritual. She's like, you have to take a pregnancy test. We need a negative pregnancy test before I can give you these meds to take for the next month. Okay. So I ran on my lunch break and I went to the Kroger and I got the cheapest little test I could find. I didn't care. Because when you're trying to get pregnant, you buy like the most expensive one because you think it's going to pick up on all the hormones better because it's, $9,000 as opposed to $250 or whatever, which pregnancy tests don't cost that anymore. But, so I got the cheapest one I could find. I ran in the bathroom stall at work. I took the pregnancy test and before I could even get the stick where it's even in eye vision, it says I'm pregnant. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So I call my husband and he's delivering mail at the time. And I said, are you driving? He was like, yeah. I was like, I'm gonna need you to pull that truck over. And he pulled over and I just I didn't even know what to think, what to say, what to do. I called Dr. Chandler and she was like, I need you in now. So I went in, did all the blood work, came back 2 days later, did blood work, and she said, the numbers say this one's not gonna make it. The beauty of the clinic that I go to and my doctor is they are believers. It's a faith-based clinic. And she prayed. She prayed with me right there. And I knew that no matter what happened, God's in control of this. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in a higher being, God was in control of this. And 9 months later, I had Luke Overstreet. I should have known when he came out that he was going to be a force to be reckoned with. Had we not induced when we did, he would not have lived. He had to be resuscitated. The cord was around his neck 3 times. He was as white as, well, I can't say he's me. I'm whiter. He was white as a sheet of paper. So there's a lot of beauty in his story, and I should have known a lot from that moment that he was gonna be my next force to be reckoned with. But that was a lot. That was a lot to sit in. A lot to sit in alone at times, a lot to sit in with friends at times. Statistically, like 6.7 million people deal with infertility. 6.7 million people. Even, let me see, 10 to 15% miscarry. Of those that get pregnant, 10 to 15% miscarry. So I say that to say there's a ton of us out there. There's a ton of us out there that have to walk this road of infertility and miscarriage. It is, my daughter is 18 years old. My son is 15 years old. I just told you the story of my 4 miscarriages and cried because it still is so deep in me. Like that's not a grief I'll ever escape. Now, I don't mean to compare it to anybody else's grief of losing, a child that they've spent life with. Please don't hear that. Everybody's journey is their own and everybody's grief is their own. It still gets me. If I think about it long enough or I tell that story, those images and those sounds and those smells and it is ingrained forever in my brain. I can never escape it. But what I can do is use it to help people who have walked the same road to know you're not alone, to know you don't have to sit in silence alone, to know you don't have to grieve alone. And to those who have either never walked it or are trying to walk beside someone who is in the middle of this or who is walking it, let me help us flip the script on that. I'm going to start with this one. Stop asking women when they're going to have a baby. Stop. We get married and 2 days later, grandma's asking us, when are you going to have me a baby? Like, stop asking women when they're going to have a baby. I can't stress that enough. All it does is remind us that we're broken. Even if I have one, stop asking me when I'm going to have another. It just reminds me that I'm broken. My body's broken. I mean, it's no different than, when someone comes back from their honeymoon and they're like, so, how's married life? All you're asking them is, how's the sex? Like, it's the same. Or if someone were to walk up to me now and be like, so, what do you do? I'll be like, listen, I'm just fat. Like, don't ask me that. Like, and I get you're just trying to be, lean in where they are, but that's one that all it does is make matters worse. Plus, even if I'm not struggling with infertility, don't ask me when I want to have a baby. My husband and I may have decided we're not going to, or it's just not time. We want to live life together for a little while. Like, don't ask that question. I know we mean well, especially here in the South. I mean, we think we're part of everybody's business. Don't ask that question. The other side of that, though, is I will also say, lean in. Check on your friend. If you know they're struggling with infertility, if you know they've had a miscarriage, it's hard, especially when I was going through those and going through my divorce, two completely different things, or with, the situation I'll talk about on our next episode. I get that we don't know how to grieve with people. We don't know what's right. What do I say? Do I even ask? Like, how, are you healing okay? Like, what do we ask? Here's some things we can ask. Just pick up the phone and say, how are you doing? We may think, I don't want to ask them, I don't want to remind them. Trust me, you don't have to remind me I just went through a miscarriage. You don't have to remind me that I still am struggling with getting pregnant. Like, you don't have to remind me. It is constantly in my head. But you can ask how I'm doing. You can ask, if I miscarried, we can talk about the baby. It's okay. Or how are things going? You may think, I don't want to ask, I don't want to remind them of this journey that they're walking through. Sometimes just getting to talk about the journey and talk about, well, I went to the doctor yesterday and here's what he said, to have somebody else step in and sit in my hope with me and not just my grief, or even just to sit in my grief with me. Sometimes it takes you not saying a word, just sitting with me. So don't be afraid of people that are walking through this and they're walking through it or have just recently walked through it. Don't be afraid. Also, don't be afraid to apologize. Don't be afraid to apologize if you accidentally and you realize you walk away and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. Don't be afraid to apologize. Like, we don't want to avoid the elephant in the room. We really don't. We just want people to love us and sit in our grief with us. So hopefully that helps give a couple of pieces of advice on how to navigate those crazy waters. So next week, on next week's episode, I've titled it The Unspoken Pause, where I dive off into attempted suicide. That one's going to be a very difficult episode for me. So I'm going to go ahead and ask now for you guys to prep for grace, a lot of grace for next week. But I hope you have a great week, and I will see you on Tuesday.